From the heart of Dubai, where tomorrow is being built today, to the world. Welcome to the CTO Show with Mehmet. Here, we redefine technology and reimagine possibilities. With Mehmet, delve into the riveting realms of AI, cybersecurity, and digital technology. Experience the thrilling highs and lows of startups. Immerse yourself in the spirit of entrepreneurship and witness the future of business innovation being written in real time. Now, without further ado, let's tune in and explore the future.
Hello and welcome back to a new episode of the CTO Show with Mehmet. Today, I'm very pleased to welcome back again Shashank Tiwari, CEO of Uno.AI. Shashank, it's nice to see you again here. Now, as it's end of the year, we're doing myself, I will be guest in some podcast as well to do a year in review, talk about, what we are waiting in 2024 and beyond. So thank you for making the time again today with me, Shashank. So first of all, tell me a little bit, how was 2023 from business perspective, and how can you, if you want, summarize how was this AI year, but from cybersecurity perspective?
Absolutely. Well, firstly, thank you. Thank you so much for having me back. I had immense amounts of pleasure and fantastic conversation the last time we were together, which was a few months back. And I'm glad that we're reconnecting and, looking back at 2023 and, seeing what the year ahead, essentially the next one, the 2024 could bring for us, right? So, good question, fantastic question, Mehmet. How was it for us? What learnings did we have? I think broadly speaking, 2023 was, in my opinion, a year of turning point or an inflection point year. We came out of the post-pandemic era, and there was massive amounts of euphoria getting into 2021, 22. And then, it started turning from extreme excitement into layoffs and, a lot of sort of pullback across the world with also, sort of the global world in turmoil. I thought 2023 was where sanity started creeping back in, right? And so from our standpoint, being in this area of intersection of AI and cybersecurity, an area that is seeing a lot of traction, a lot of love, a lot of excitement, we certainly had a very busy year. So 2023 was super busy year, both on the side of product and innovation, and then also on the aspects of, just broader market appetite, right? This was also from at least our standpoint, from Uno.AI standpoint, this was a time when we had the opportunity to do a general availability of our, broader exciting product. So, a lot more customer engagements. We matured from being an early access product into a, full-fledged enterprise-ready product with all the certifications and, all the sort of bells and whistles added. So that also allowed us to engage quite a bit. And, as that always happens with every enterprise company experience, it goes through its motions, right? You learn, you adapt, and you figure out which use cases have the maximum value. So personally, we spent a lot of time there. But we'll certainly talk today. I think the market is extremely exciting, and multiple companies had, I would say, a very profound experience in 2023. Some, of course, struggled. Some even had to pull back, and some even shut down. Some of the early ones, unfortunately. But also it was a time when, a lot of people stepped back and started looking at fundamentals once again, right? The focus was back on what value are we delivering out here? Why do we exist? Why should this company be there in the times to come? So I think it was really like a time of reckoning for a lot of companies. I think in venture building process, having been in that world for so long is a good thing, right? You always need that reset. You always need those fundamentals to creep back in so that then you can have the opportunity to build generational companies.
Yeah, 100%. And what a year, actually. Let's start to dissect 2023 from, because at the end of the day, it's on top of mind of everyone, cybersecurity. And then we will touch on the AI part in that. So, every year we know that, we have predictions from the previous year that the cyber attacks will increase. So I think indeed we saw a lot of cyber attack that happened. But from your perspective, Shashank, have you seen any change in the way the threat actors have tried to change their, I would say, maybe tactics and strategies? have we started to see a new trend of attacks again? Because I know you talk to a lot of leaders in cybersecurity through your day-to-day enrollment and engagement with your customers. So, what have been, I mean, the top cybersecurity trends from customer perspective, in your opinion?
Yeah, it's a super important point and a great question there, Mehmet. So if you start thinking about cybersecurity, it's been an ongoing, continuing conversation, right? Like a few years back, people, leaders across board weren't even fully aware about the risks and the threats because of cybersecurity. That became front and center as we started seeing a lot more attacks that were extremely punishing, attacks that had uh, sort of substantial ramifications in terms of losses, in terms of risks. So I think that's what woke the whole the enterprise world up a few years back. And what has happened in 2023, I feel, has been at one level continuation of that. Certainly there have been more varieties of attacks, more frequency of attacks, and more types of threat actors and more types of attacks emerging. So that has certainly happened. There's no two ways on that. um, I do feel so that I think that the attack sophistication has also changed. One part that was discussed quite a bit in the beginning, although we are not seeing so much manifest in the wild, was about, will the bad actors, will the threat actors also start using all this interesting AI tools out there? And will we start having malware? Will we start having ransomware? Will we start having phishing attacks that would become impossible to detect because the AI enabled or the AI generated versions of these are going to be more nefarious or more difficult to catch. So I think that debate has certainly popped up, and people are talking about it in the theoretical world. um, don't know if that necessarily has been the biggest attack vector, though. I think, it's a reality. It is probably going to unfold, but we're not seeing too much evidence of that at the moment. So we're still continuing to see a lot of the attacks that have become prevalent, from the standard sort of ransomware, phishing centric, unauthorized access, data leakage, to some sort of exfiltration attacks. So those have certainly happened. We've also seen examples across board, from banking to healthcare to consumers, that the types of attacks and the sophistication have also increased. For example, we did end up even hearing, for example, large manufacturing public companies like Clorox mentioned in their one of their sort of investor conversations that they were unable to meet their expected targets, I understand, because they were unfortunately under, or rather on the receiving end of a cyber attack, which caused their manufacturing ability to get hampered, right? And so we are beginning to see some of those. We also saw, of course, the unfolding of the big move it attack, which has led to substantial amounts of loss across companies, including healthcare data losses and a whole lot of other entities just impacted because of a third party vendor. So certainly the attack sophistication increased, and there is a lot more of that, goes without saying. In addition to that, I think from a cybersecurity standpoint, two other things became important in 2023. The rise of AI, in an interesting way, also led to questions about security in the world of, in the domain of AI, right, or security in a post AI world. So there was a lot of conversation around breach of confidential data or privacy or attacks that could emerge from the availability and adoption of these broad language model centric Gen AI tools. Would that lead to some new type of attacks? And certainly there has been a lot of conversation and study around it. We also started seeing a lot of conversation around privacy. Right now, sometimes the cybersecurity aspects and the privacy aspects are kind of separated out, but I think now we are seeing a lot of convergence of that, where the conversation of privacy is becoming front and center. Privacy, both in the traditional sense or also in the sort of post AI world. There's also been a lot of talk about regulating AI from a privacy dimension, apart from cybersecurity dimension, and there has also been a lot of concerns around both security risks as well as privacy risks with deep fakes and manipulated voice and manipulated videos and manipulated image content that can certainly be used quite effectively by malicious actors. There have also have been some attacks around that, right, where people have been impersonated, and even larger enterprises have been fooled with those impersonated deep fakes and made to believe, and actually ended up being part and parcel of those sort of malicious attacks that were carried out. So certainly, the attack sophistication has increased, and there is no stopping there. I think then, unfortunately, it's going to be more of that in 2024. I think.
Yeah, you mentioned a couple of incidents, and I think the biggest one or the one that made a lot of noise is the MGM one also as well. Was one of the huge ones that all over the world everyone was talking about. And by the way, it was not only in the US or North America. Like remember at the beginning of the year, Australia, like they faced a lot of data leaks from telcos and healthcare. So and you mentioned one thing, Shashank, about the incident of Clorox, where they were telling the investors. So do you think that 2023 was the year where finally, let's say at least the CISO and the CIO were able to convey the message to the board about the real threats of from cybersecurity perspective, especially because it came at a stage where the AI started to accelerate as well. So do you think we reached this point where investors, board members, they now understand these threats in a better way than before?
Oh, 100%. 100%. I think there are multiple drivers for it, Mehmet. One, of course, as we both just discussed, right? Like all these attacks have become front and center, and they have really caused meaningful damage, including the one like you mentioned on MGM. Just kind of brought almost Las Vegas to a halt. And yes, there have been also rulings and sort of legal consequences. For example, the SolarWinds CISO was sort of charged for negligence, if you may. Again, there's a whole case still unfolding, but there was some of those pieces also came through this year. The SEC also stepped up their own controls over cyber attacks, and now they have, in fact, a new regulation that is going live here for public companies starting tomorrow, I believe, if I'm facts right, December 18th. Which is really focused on active reporting and actively letting the consumers know. So broadly, when there is an incident that could have a material impact, as SEC likes to talk about it, which essentially is anything that is of consequence, broadly put. Usually states, some states out here mandate at least the party to disclose it and, let their customers know and let their important parties know. But now this no more broad mandate from SEC is also going to push a lot of public companies into this spotlight where they'll have to let the world know if there is an incident which has a material impact. And in fact, there is a timeline set for it that they need to report that and explain that, I believe, within 4 days, if I've understood that correctly. And a lot of that ramifications of that will unfold. So certainly going back to your question, with all these severity of attacks, all the conversations underway, all the newer regulations coming through, all the consequences, which is also manifesting sometimes in terms of real legal charges and stock prices tumbling down or other kinds of real impact to business. I think it is certainly become, there is without a doubt, it has become a board level conversation. Today you don't have to do too much convincing, in fact, to the board or to the leadership or to investors that you do need a cybersecurity program. I don't think that is a trouble anymore. And it's also global, right? Like this problem is not just restricted to the United States, as you rightly mentioned. Attacks have unfolded around the world. There have been substantial attacks, down in Australia and New Zealand. There have been attacks in Europe. There have been attacks in the Middle East, South Asia, just about everywhere, right? And each sort of part of the world has seen the negative impacts of these attacks. So I think certainly the conversation has bubbled up to the board level, without a doubt.
Yeah.
And yeah, I mean, the time is here. Let's put it that way, right? Like, there's no more trying to convince that this is important. You should pay attention. It's already front and center, right? So I think there will be more conversations. In fact, I wouldn't doubt that now going forward, cybersecurity and your cyber posture and how smart you're about that will be in every conversation as companies are valued or companies are acquired or people join a company or the market weighs them or partners weigh them. I think that is perhaps going to creep into all those conversations eventually.
Yeah, indeed. And Shashank, if you want to also dissect kind of where the CISO and the security team, they're putting their efforts and budget in 2023, where they were more on the preventive part, which is good, or where the aftermath, like like where the things really start to kick. And I know here where you as Uno.AI you can help them a lot. So have we start to see this understanding that it's not only from preventing perspective, you need to think also about incident response, about getting things back. So how this changed during 2023?
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. I think the focus has become more holistic, right? The focus is certainly more comprehensive today as opposed to just one piece of the puzzle, right? And so, um, there is the classic sort of, you can parse it two ways, if you may. You can think in terms of prevent, detect, and then respond. The classic way that cybersecurity has worked. And you can also parse it in a way where you think of an incident or an attack as the sort of focal point or the access point or the pivot point, and then you have everything you can do before that to try and prevent and avoid it, everything you can do while that is unfolding, and then everything you can do, which unfortunately you are still subject to one, right? And I think all three have become very important because prevention is super critical. That's how you would get evaluated. CISOs and the cybersecurity teams would get evaluated in terms of how great are they at preventing, how great are they at understanding threats, and then of course absolutely, as you rightly said, that despite all your controls, despite all your good hygiene and health and all your strategic thinking, you might still end up coming under an attack, and it might become something that could lead to damage and may even lead to substantial damage. And in that case, I think it would be a lot about how do you understand the incident quickly, how you're able to respond to it at a very fast rate, how you're able to piece the story together, how you're able to get to the bottom of that at a very rapid pace. So certainly that has become an important piece of the puzzle. And then even beyond that, and which is where that unfortunately you were hacked, unfortunately you had a compromise, unfortunately you had data leakage or unauthorized access, but now you need to go and understand that to a level of detail that you can assess the damage accurately, whether it's from a standpoint of claiming your cyber insurance or reporting it to your investors and customers, or to giving the assurance to the broader world that I've understood how bad that particular incident was, and I have made sure that going forward such kinds of incidents are definitely going to be avoided, and that we have really upped our game, right? So I think it's all of the three that have become important. I must mention, though, Mehmet, that it's been tough to be a CISO, I think, in 2023, and I speak to a lot of them because I essentially service that market, and a lot of them are good friends as well. Many of them have also seen their budgets being cut, or they're being questioned because there's pressure, of course, to up the cybersecurity game, but also companies at large have felt the sort of pressure in terms of declining revenue, or the broader rise of interest rates, or instability in the world, and so they've also asked them to just do more with less, right? And so I think there has been, of course, the broader mandate of go up your game, but also up your game while we might not give you more resources, more money, and more time for you to figure stuff out. Go figure it out sooner, go figure it out more efficiently, and go figure it out, make things more effective with whatever you've got. So I think certainly the bar has been raised, and I think there's no going back, but also there is a major push towards effectiveness and efficiency. So it's a tough one. It's a tough one for them, and I don't think it's easing out. It's only going to get more competitive and tougher.
Yeah, that resonates a lot. Like even here on the local market level, and maybe also Shashank, like the same thing. Although like we don't feel the economical pressure same as the rest of the world. Still, kind of things moving, projects going on. But yeah, every single season, they are feeling very stressed. And now coming to the AI, so although like it can be utilized from cybersecurity perspective, both on the, I would say, offense and defense side. But what I'm hearing from like not only CISOs, like everyone on the management at customers, that this AI thing actually it brought new projects, and these new projects means new threat vectors to them, and they needed to keep it up between adopting the new technology and at the same time keeping things in proper, I would say, at least protected the way it should do. But AI raised this issues about privacy, about how you handle it, and we heard a lot of stories about even big companies that their data were actually put with OpenAI, ChatGPT, and the data were leaked. So how are you seeing this new AI thing? Because it's a fact. I remember the time I think we spoke in on August or July. So still it was like people trying to figure out what this new AI thing is, but now it's well seen that you cannot continue your business without having AI. So how are you seeing, people doing this balance between adopting the AI while keeping the things secure also as well?
Yeah, yeah, no, no, absolutely. I mean, AI's moment is here. There is no two ways on that. And I think what we have seen in the last, I would say, a year or so, especially after November 30th, 2022, when ChatGPT was first introduced to the world, of course, there's a lot of work that has gone on prior to that, including people like us, who were heads down building some interesting language-based and transformer-based models. But, broadly speaking, the world sort of was awakened or reawakened um, with the promise of AI post that, the big launch. And so as we came into 2023, it was very evident that it had, made inroads everywhere, right? It had made inroads from consumer facing apps. It had made inroads into creative disciplines and copywriting. It had made inroads into planning your trip, to running your marketing campaign, to doing things in the world of creative storylines, and so on and so forth, right? It just, the applications were emerging every day, and the same thing happened in cybersecurity as well. We did see, as you rightly said, sort of emergence of both sides of the coin. On one side, everybody got enthusiastic about AI, and of course, as it happens in the world of cybersecurity, everyone starts adopting certain buzzwords or certain trends, and starts incorporating into the products at a very rapid pace. And we certainly saw that with Gen AI as well. Large players, small players, new players, everybody started speaking, the gospel of Gen AI. You certainly saw that, on the floors of RSA. You certainly saw that on the sound bites, that were generated and created by all kinds of cybersecurity vendors. And you also saw that, across from analysts to the industry, kind of, talking about it and discussing it actively. So certainly, from a standpoint of what you could call AI for security became a topic. Now, as AI for security became a topic, the CISOs obviously, and security leaders started getting interested and started getting, I would say, more curious about where this time AI could take them. Right, in the past, AI had been looked at more of a pattern recognition, platform, or a pattern recognition software. And now the idea was, well, in this new generation or new form that AI is taking, could it do more than that, right? And so I think there was a lot of conversation that started emerging about, could AI be an enabler that could start making them more productive? Could be this be the one that can help their people up their game, right? So there was a lot of that conversation that emerged, and so folks jumped onto it. And obviously the most accessible, easy to plug into and start experimenting with was Chat GPT and the OpenAI APIs. Post that, of course, as we have seen, there's been emergence of multiple alternatives out there, and then of course the rise of open source, and all of them have emerged, I would argue, at a faster rate than OpenAI. And some of them are competing quite well with OpenAI, and you see them, I truly believe, some of them outsmart the Chat GPT and OpenAI, or sort of platform as we see today. But having said that, I think as soon as these companies started playing with AI, the very first question that started becoming was, but what about security for AI, right? So we are looking at AI for security, like, we are going to use the power of AI to run our security programs better. But how about vice versa, because this is going to impose on us or create on us a new set of challenges. So, is that going to be actually more troublesome than the benefits we'll get from AI, right? So there's been this whole debate, if you may, that has emerged over the last multiple months, which is the AI for security versus security for AI, right? So you're on one side trying to look at the promise of, how you could leverage AI to become smarter, better, do more, unleash the capability that you probably don't have today. So that's the whole AI for security. And the other side, you are being pulled back by the concerns or the real threats or risk of, what about security for AI? Is this going to impose new kind of problems? Am I going to run into new type of injection attacks? Am I, going to inadvertently leak my confidential data, or, proprietary data, or some privacy sort of a piece puzzle might get unfortunately harmed, because now I am trying to just open up my enterprise data and my internal data to this AI engine, which sort of is like a black box, and it's very hard to kind of unwind from it. So I think like that has been the biggest debate, honestly. AI for security versus security for AI. Definitely causing a lot of cyber professionals to also be equally cautious as they're optimistic. They're just kind of struggling internally. And those two sentiments simultaneously, sort of coming at them.
Yeah. Now moving to next year, what do you think? Of course, like AI will be one of the top of minds, right? But what other trends are you expecting to see next year, Shashank? Especially, like this AI thing, it looks like, as they say, the genie is out of the box and you cannot return it back. So indeed. But the things what we are trying to see, especially in the last 2 months, is like it's really, although like I try to cover every day, as you know, and I try to read a lot, but sometimes I'm feeling myself like very late to the party, as they say. So are we going to see the same momentum continuing next year? And how this will affect again cybersecurity and the whole technology market, in your opinion?
Yeah, yeah. No, no, absolutely. In fact, I'm going to step back a little bit and try and give my 2 cents in terms of how I feel 2024 is going to be. And, that will hopefully also answer the question of AI and cyber and
Sure.
AI. So, my belief is that 2024 is going to be a very important year for us. And what I mean by that is important year, not just for us as a company, or, us as a sort of a sector working in this domain, but I think just broadly for humankind. And what I mean by that is, we had a very unusual last few years. The post 2000 era led to the rise of internet, and then we saw the whole emergence of mobile phones. The world has really changed post the internet and mobile phones. We saw rapid growth over 10 years, more than 10 years of, bull run, where so many applications, so many companies were built. It changed the way we interacted with the world. It changed the way we interacted with each other. It changed the way how we did business. And so certainly we became a different world in 2020, if you may, as opposed to what we were in, the beginning of the millennium, 2000. So 20 years was really like substantially transformative, I think, for the world at large. And certainly it manifested, um, quite a bit in the world of business, right? And then we, of course, were, faced with this big global pandemic, and the global pandemic, in some sense, in my mind, was the big reset, right? Where we all stepped back, and then we saw, of course, the extreme cautious period led by the extreme euphoria, and then last year, or whatever, this year rather, 2023 being like the inflection point here, where where things were kind of setting back to normalcy. Now, what I mean by that is, I think 2024, in my opinion, is the beginning of the next leg, or the next era of the big transformative change that we're going to see over the next 10 to 20 years. So just like we saw the internet and the mobile phone, and that led to something very substantial over a 20-year period, I think we are already at the beginning of that next leg, or the next generation of that big change, which means that this is what is begun to unfold in 2023. It will take shape quite a bit in 2024, and that will lead towards the vision 2030s and the vision 2040s and 50s, where we are really looking at a certainly very different world from what it is today. So now, piecing that together and stepping back, what does it mean? I think AI is going to play a very big part in that puzzle. More than just AI alone, I think amplifications and ramifications of AI will have a big impact in terms of, they will start becoming more pervasive. They will start entering into consumer goods. They are already there in many instances. For example, a lot of the modern cars have substantial amount of, computer vision sort of abilities built into it. But you'll start seeing this next generation of autonomous driving, autonomous flying, perhaps, and stuff like that, that will start becoming bigger and bigger. So the applications in multiple ways, right? Intelligence kind of permeating across society, and therefore the rise of AI would become, a lot more than what we see today. Now, of course, with the rise of AI, not only would there be various kinds of threats, but also there be various types of opportunities. So, more back home, more close home, If you start thinking in terms of cybersecurity, of course, it's going to be a bigger puzzle. But I would also say that it's going to be way beyond and way bigger than just cyber and AI. There's going to be substantial impact in terms of the way we interact with people, the way we work, the way we entertain ourselves, the way we explore the world, the way we learn about things. Like all of that is going to get impacted in substantial ways, right? And that will be sort of the first inklings of that would start coming in 2024. Now, what does that also mean? One more bit that I want to mention is that will create a lot of opportunities. I
True.
think that you're going to see the emergence of a new set of opportunities, and the pace of those opportunities becoming available and people jumping in to fill the white space or the gaps is also going to increase. So, just the same way that this year we saw, hey, Chat GPT opened some opportunity. Now you have like 15 different large foundational models and 500 different other companies working a layer above that, and then there's the rise of open source, and there is all kinds of applications that is thinking, how can we take AI to the next level. I think that will only accelerate. So I think if you start thinking about 2024, I have the feeling the first half of 2024 we'll actually see 2x the speed that we have already seen, which itself, as you rightly mentioned, is becoming impossible to keep pace with. There's just so much happening. Like, really have to be on top of it, only do that full time to even just be aware of what's happening. So that's going to become 2x. So just imagine, that's going to become fairly chaotic, but also a lot more opportunity. That's what I think. But the another part I want to add to this though is that it's possible that like any hype cycle, it might get overhyped in some sense at some point in time.
Mm.
Um, and that could lead to certain disappointment as well, in the sense that people might just get ahead of themselves and feel like what might become true in 2030 is actually going to become true in November of 2024, right? And so they will just over index on some things or get over optimistic. And then, as it happens with humankind, we get overly exuberant about something, and if it doesn't match up, or match our expectations, we certainly become very depressed about it and feel like, hey, this is a promise where we got cheated on, right? So I feel like it's possible that second half of 2024 might also see a little bit of reset there, where people will feel like, hey, we invested so much time, money, energy. AI isn't becoming what we thought it's becoming. So you'll have to give it some time too. I think like it'll take its own time, just like the internet did, right? Like, or just like the mobile phone did. It has to go through its own adoption curve, and it'll go through its own hype cycle. It'll go through its own norming forming. But I do feel that in the long run, 2024 is going to be a fantastic year, and I think this is the year to seize the opportunity for everyone.
Yeah, hopefully. And to your point, I agree with you. Like, when people get so excited about something and then, they put expectations that actually are not realistic, and they say, oh, no, like this is not. And this is remind me, in the early days when some companies, they tried to come out with, you know, uh, small device, hand devices, like the Palm and the other ones, and it didn't work with them until the right moment came again, and then you have the iPads and the Surface and all this. So yeah, pretty much, I think the same thing is already happening today, because people, you know, this is what I try also to cover on the show, that like the AI thing is not only what you see through a chat box, and we talked about that the last time. Yeah, but I'm also like very excited, because now we have, it's not because I have something against the company, but I love to see at least two players in the same domain. So now we have another player to challenge OpenAI, and this is good, because they're gonna be forced to innovate. The others gonna be forced to innovate. So everyone will be a winner at the end. Now, shifting a little bit gears, Shashank. So we talked about the market and how the market was tough. So I know for a fact the market was tough in the US and in Europe and in some other part of the world. It was not the case, honestly, in the Middle East. And I've met you. I had the chance to meet you face to face here in Dubai. So from your perspective, how did you see? First, let me break it down into questions. So
Yeah.
first, are we going to have a better market conditions globally next year, from of course, all the discussions you are having with the executives and so on? Second question, how are you seeing my region, the Middle East region, between Dubai, United Arab Emirates, Saudi Arabia? How did you see or saw the difference in the dynamics, I would say, in the market between the US and this part of the world?
Yeah, lots of fantastic questions there, Mehmet, and lots of learning for me this year. As you know, I not only am um, actively building a company and in the midst of all of these conversations with various kinds of leaders here, but I had the chance to go and interact with a lot of leaders in the Middle East as well, and continue to do so. So um, let me answer the first one first about the US markets and the global
Sure.
market at large, and then of course we can cover some more on the Middle East per se, because I think there's a lot of exciting stuff to talk about that region as well. um, so if you think about the US markets, it was actually a confusing market in 2023. I wouldn't necessarily say it was a negative market or a market which was going through a recession, because honestly speaking, I think although we did see the rise of interest rates, it is generally a low interest rate country, with a high growth type of, very optimistic type of a system where people like to invest and spend, and therefore, like to grow on to the next set of promises. That certainly pulled back a tiny bit because of the rising interest rates. There was certainly a little bit more conservative approach to things, where companies which had gotten ahead of themselves during the pandemic period started laying off and kind of self-correcting a little bit. But at a broader level, though, I do feel that the American economy still came out very strong. For companies that were doing meaningful work, there were still plenty of business on the table. The stock markets, if you start thinking about it, for companies that have strong fundamentals, rewarded them. Sure enough, they were not the euphoria level sort of valuations that we saw in 2020 2021 period. Certainly there was a little bit of correction, but having said that, I think we did see the market kind of bounce back, and we did see the market reward all the ones who had the fundamentals strong and revenue growth occurring in a good positive manner. And that was also very evident if you start looking at people who invested in AI, for example. The Microsoft stock certainly saw very positive upward movement. Same thing happened in the world of cybersecurity. You did see a lot of strong performance from players like, the larger ones like Palo Alto Networks or CrowdStrike, or, the various others. So I think, like, overall, the market wasn't really, I would say, as much in a depressed state or kind of a recession, but it was more in a corrective state. It was more in a pullback. Let's reset. Let's go back to fundamentals. Let's focus on what really can help us succeed in the long run. I think that's what ended up happening. Of course, it was deliberate as well, with the Fed kind of increasing the rates. And now I do feel like it will pave its way towards things easing out and the market kind of getting more buoyant in 2024. And, then perhaps towards the end of 2024, coming back, as I was saying, more towards normalcy, where you start seeing the public markets becoming more receptive to IPOs, and the broader business becoming a little bit more optimistic. So that's certainly going to be, I think, the sentiment. At least that's my hunch, basis all the data that I have seen after all the conversations I've had. Um, and then I feel would also impact the global sentiment. I think a large part of Europe, which certainly is more closely linked with the way the American economy works, or a large part of East Asia, is also going to see a lot of that happen. Now, having said that, the world still has a couple of unknowns that people are not able to piece completely together. I mean, there are a couple of sort of live wars underway, if you may. There is a lot of geopolitical realignment that's going on. And I think certainly the global markets at some level are worried about it and trying to understand the scale of the impact of that. But I do feel that I think eventually peace will prevail, and, all of those things will find its path. And we will start seeing 2024 onwards a little bit more normalization, and, broader focus on commerce, broader focus on growth, broader focus on collaboration, broader focus on positive energy, and that would just kind of propel itself up. So I think that's my sort of broader sentiment. I'm an optimistic optimistic person by nature, but also I do want to, as I always do, a realistic sense of my understanding of the market, and given my own personal optimistic outlook plus understanding of everything that I have been ingesting and understanding, both from other experts in the field, from executives and investors on one side, to just looking at the data, I do feel very convinced about it. So I think that's my sort of broader take there. Now, talking about Middle East, so Middle East was, in my experience in 2023, was, like I mentioned, an extremely educational period for me. What I did take away from my Middle East, interactions with customers and the government, and just understanding the markets at large. We were lucky enough to be included in some interesting initiatives that are spearheaded by the Dubai government. As an example, I ended up making a trip to Saudi Arabia and saw what was going on there. Also got a chance to speak at one of the largest fintech conferences there. Where I was, they were generous enough to call me as a guest there. We've started doing, business with some of the largest enterprises in that region. Basis all of these different sorts of inputs, there are two or three sentiments that I really took away, and I continue to feel very excited about. Um, One is that region at large, of course, led by UAE and Saudi Arabia, I would say, and maybe even Qatar, although my understanding of that market is a little lesser than the other two, um, is that there is a lot of enthusiasm and there is a lot of deliberate ambition and deliberate excitement to go invest in technology. So I think like that's something that is very evident. That's something that is very clear. It's not just words being spewed out there. It's not just, larger charters being set out there, but there are very deliberate efforts being made, right? In terms of committees being set up, the money being put behind it, invitation to a lot of global players to come become part of the puzzle. So I do feel that I think there's a huge desire to become a technology leader. That whole region is very, very, very curious about it and very, very committed to it, which I think will take that region, uh, at multiple, sort of accelerated pace, if you may, at a very fast speed into the future. And it'll do a lot of excellent, sort of, and productive outcomes for that region. So I really feel bullish about it, and I feel like that's excellent for them. The second part that I also saw was that I think, broadly speaking, the leaders out there at all levels, from government leaders to corporate leaders to the just leaders at all levels of management in that region, are very, very hungry to learn, are extremely, I would say, at some level, very humble and extremely inviting, and do want to include the world in their journey, right? So they are already committing a lot of their energy, their money, their sort of desire to go build the next world. But at the same time, they are doing this in a very inclusive fashion, right? They're really inviting people from all over the world to come and be part of that journey, right? And they are being, I would say, extremely humble and generous, and and extremely good in wanting to learn from everybody. And that's at least was my personal experience. A lot of people gave me, a lot of, I would say, audience, and included all the inputs that was coming from my own experience out of Silicon Valley, out of building tech companies. And those inputs were taken very seriously, and those inputs continue to be taken with, a lot of, um, good thought and in a very positive way, because they do see that learning from people's experiences around the world would actually help them incorporate a lot of that goodness from all over the world, into the programs that they're running. So I felt like that was phenomenal, right? Like that was very, very good and very nice of them. And I think I do hope them all success, in that domain. And I also see that happening across board, local academia, they're infusing it with professors being brought in from the best of universities. In fact, one of our collaborators in the region, who we really like, has come out of Carnegie Mellon University, and right now is spearheading a lot of that, initiative in MB's UAI in Abu Dhabi, right? So this is not uncommon at all. A lot of this is going on. And then, last but not the least, I do feel like they have put a certain timeline to it. See, sometimes any region, any area, could be very ambitious. They want to achieve things, but if they don't put a certain timeline to it, it becomes an open-ended goal. And open-ended goals typically, I think, in my opinion at least, and my worldview of years of seeing many global markets, sometimes don't really pan out, because until you put a certain
Right.
goal and time to it, the realization of those goals become more of an ambition, less of a reality. But I do feel that here, in that region, talk about Saudi Arabia as an example, very aggressive timelines for what they want to do by 2030. Similarly, UAE has some very important mandates and missions in terms of what they want to accomplish on a year-on-year basis. And definitely, again, that Vision 2030 plays in. They also have humongous ambitions for way further out. I believe it's 2071, or it'll be 100 years
Yes.
of UAE, but they're already kind of planning with that in mind of what UAE should look like 2071, and they have so many programs today underway with that 2071 vision, and how we would reach that majestic vision that we have. So I feel very thrilled every time I go there. I'm like very enthused, energized, just seeing people who are so committed and just so enthusiastic and so full of life and wanting to do things. So So that's my takeaway. But it was my learning year in 2023. I don't have much of a history in that region before this, but I must say that I really learned a lot and continue to cherish that, and look forward to doing more in that region.
That's great, Shashak, to hear. And I personally, on a personal level, I want to congratulate you because you, at least, came out from all the way from California, from the Silicon Valley. You came here to the region, and you saw in your eyes, what's happening and how dynamic is the scene. And honestly speaking, very few, CEOs or co-founders, they take this step to go and, and I love this approach because it's kind of, because at the end you're doing this for the company as well, because it's like any other company, you need to find ways to open new markets. And you came out all the way there. We met, by the way, in the area called 2071 area with Shashank. So yeah, so it's a place where, they have a lot of programs in place, incubators, and even some VCs, they sit there as well. And to your point, Shashank, one of the things that I noticed in 2023, when everyone, actually, it started since pandemic, to be honest with you, and this is where I felt like this is going to happen later, because in pandemic 2020, when everywhere was closed, this was one of the few places in the world where
That's right.
you can go. Of course, we used to take the precautions and so on, but business, I will not say as usual, but very close to as usual. And by
Mhm.
2021, we Dubai had the expo here, so millions of people came. But from business perspective, especially because we are in tech, so I started to see this message to the world that we want to become, it's not replacement, but because there is nothing that can replace something else. I don't believe in this.
Right.
But we want to be like Silicon Valley. We want to be one of the few hubs in the world like Silicon Valley. And many people, they don't know that there's another major hub in the US, which is in Texas. I know that for a fact. London, Singapore, all these major technology hubs. So Dubai and the other Emirates and the Saudi Arabia, they want to have this. So this is, again, congratulations on having this step,
Thank you.
Shashank, because, and I think you saw the results immediately. Now I know, and I'm mentioning this because I know a lot of audience are from the US. Guys, don't be afraid of coming to the region. You might hear a lot of myths, like, yeah, there is, business is not stable, and no, that's not true. So of course, maybe our cycles are different little bit, uh, but the business is here, and the initiatives are real. They are not just, as Shashank mentioned, they are not just on the paper. So we see this, every day, every couple of days, we have a new initiative. And this initiative, as you mentioned, Shashank, like, it has some timelines. So again, congratulations on having,
Thank you.
the operations running here in the region. I believe, because what also from technology perspective, you're trying to solve a real problem, which we face here as well in the region. So this is why I believe, you will have a success. Now, last thing before we close, Shashank, and because it's related to the markets, I was hearing from a lot of people that it was a dry market for companies who are trying to raise funds this year. Is this also changing? I'm optimistic like you, by the way. I believe 2024 will be much better. But for startups, because I know that a lot of startups, they, unfortunately, they ran out of cash. And I know for a fact, even some of them, they try to come here to the region. Of course, the dynamics of the region from fundraising is not similar to the US, even from scale perspective. But are things easing up next year when companies, and say, I need your advice for a founder who's about to raise funds. Like, will his or her life will be much easier in 2024, or it will be tough, same as 2023?
It's a good question, and certainly it's something that I understand well. Um, Broadly speaking, Mehmet, I think it's been a tough year for fundraising for the broader markets in 2023. Right, so 2023 was a year that, remember, was essentially a period that was the post 2021 boom. Right, and so what that really means is people had over invested, people have invested, at much higher valuations, and they had seen the market pull back. And as it happens in the case of investing, a lot of that is emotional, a lot of that is behavior driven, a lot of that is, sort of either it's fear or greed driven. And I think fear had really caught the broader sentiment. So Certainly, we saw a lot of funds becoming a lot more cautious, writing fewer checks, writing smaller checks, asking for more scrutiny, looking at more fundamentals. Certainly the whole mood changed in 2023, and that meant that for a lot of companies, it had become incredibly hard to raise whatever round they were raising. I think the earlier phase rounds were still more active, but if you're a slightly later stage company, it had become even tougher. And unless you knew an exceptional company that had all the numbers and everything else in your favor, it had become even more difficult because ultimately, I think for a lot of these funds that invest in late stage, they were unclear about what the exit is going to look like, right? Given that the public markets were drying up and IPOs weren't happening at the same rate, that they had seen in the prior few years. So certainly it was a very tough year, right, in 2023. The only segment that continued to see love was AI. In fact, I think that AI certainly was one place where you continue to see some higher valuations than normal. You also saw investors get excited about it and get into deals. So that was the only one I think where we're seeing a bunch of deals happen in 2023. Um, Plus, in addition to that, we also saw that certain other evergreen markets is what I would call them, including cybersecurity, continue to see activity, right? So there were raises and there were infusion of funds all across board. Again, a little bit more conservative than prior years, at least the immediate prior couple of years, but nonetheless, I think there was some activity. Now, having said that, if you were building a SaaS company, if you were building, a company that didn't fall into a couple of these, special categories for whatever reason, you were still a great business. I think you struggled with raising money because it was just a tough market. I could see that up close because, we are in this segment in that sort of intersection of AI and cyber. So we get a lot of love. We kept on getting a lot of inbound interest, or we also added in some tiny bits of capital and we raised more as we were progressing. But that was because of multiple reasons, not only because we had very compelling product and platform, but also all the progress we've been making. But to be very truthful, I think we were the exception rather than the norm. I think that in general the norm was extremely difficult market, and there's no two ways on that. And even for people like us, I think compared to the prior year, we had to do more justification, more explanation to do whatever we were able to do in 2023. Now, walking into 2024, which is, I think, what you kind of, pointed towards, like, hey, if you're a founder today and raising, given what we both have kind of discussed right now, a tight market, what would 2024 look like? My suspicion is 2024 is going to be a slightly better year than 2023 in terms of fundraising. The reason being that, ultimately for a lot of these funds, they also have to do deals because they have their own charters. They usually have a 10-year horizon. They have money sitting there, dry powder. They've got to deploy it. Their charter is not to just keep the money in the bank. So, definitely there'll be more activity. But I do not see them deviating from a cautious approach. So they will certainly do a lot more scrutiny. They'll expect a lot more progress. They'll expect a lot more of, thoughtful sort of company building at all levels, from founders' ability to pull it off to, is there a real demand for that product, to, product market fit if you're a little further along, to, what does the market size look like all of those questions that normally investors anyway indulge in, I think are going to become pieces that they will certainly want to make sure that they're comfortable with, right? So that certainly there's going to be a bit of that. But having said that, I do feel that the second half of 2024, and usually, at least in the US, there are two cycles when it comes to fundraising. I mean, again, globally it's different, and I know in the EMEA markets there are generally a little bit more process centric, a little bit more conservative in terms, and also I think there are big funds there. I mean, there are humongous large funds also in that region, which also play quite actively in the US markets. For example, the funds out of Saudi Arabia, or some of the sovereign set sitting out of Abu Dhabi or Dubai. These guys are global players, but nonetheless, I think at the broader segment, it's still a certain different style that and approach that they take. But if you start looking at it, is the US market. So this is again a guesstimate. There are usually two cycles. One round of funding usually gets active somewhere around beginning of the year, which goes on till about spring. Usually you see a lot of activity in the February March type of time frame. Then summer sets in and things sort of taper off a little bit, and then things pick up again in the fall, right? As people come back after their vacations and they want to do a few more deals before they close the year. you see a lot of activity in the September, October type of time, like basically late August to early November is when a lot of deals get done. My hunch is 2024, you will see a bunch of deals being done, and so the market's becoming a little more open. But the second half might see a lot more activity, and the second half might see a lot more activity because by then, assuming that everything that we are expecting 2024 to kind of deliver for us as a society probably will start coming through, and things will start getting more back towards normal globally. And also, I think the second part would be that the public markets, I think, would start getting into a mode where they might become more receptive towards, an IPO, or, more M&A activity will increase, which generally has a downstream impact of, generally the funding community getting more excited and saying, okay, let's go write more checks. Let's fund more companies because there's an opportunity to build a lot of generational companies. And, there's a lot of transformation that we're going to see in the times ahead. So now is the time to invest. So I think that's how I kind of think about it, broadly speaking.
Yeah, hopefully everyone is waiting more IPOs in 2024, I believe, because there are a lot of companies that are due. I know in the US they are due to IPO. And good you mentioned, Shashank, about, like the 10 years of the VCs, because they have to get this money. They take it from their,
LPs, yeah.
LPs, and they need, and, as GPs, they need to spend, not to spend, they need to invest that money. To your point, and it's good you mentioned that it would be educational if someone in the US or someone who's not from this region about how these big funds here in the Middle East they act, even the VCs, by the way. So yes, as you mentioned, they are more cautious. Ticket sizes are not same as the ticket size in the US. So what might be a seed fund in the US might be a pre-seed thing here. And what's Series A, like the numbers change a lot. So
Yes, of course.
like seed fund of $2 million or $3 million is something normal in the US. So here they don't call it seed. It's like a Series A or something like this. So these numbers can change, but good you mentioned that, Shashank. And yeah, so like this, really, I think we covered quite good about 2023 and what we are waiting for 2024. And I love this time we had the chance to talk about the market and the conditions. And again, thank you, Shashank, for making the time. Second time with me, actually third time, because we met one time face to face also as well. And hope to see you when you are back in the UAE and in the region. And thank you very much for sharing your expectations for 2024. And, as usual, this is how we end, every episode. Thank you for tuning in. I hope you loved this episode with Shashank. We're trying to do a year-end review and predictions for 2024. We have a couple of these down the road also as well. So thank you very much for tuning in, and we'll see you again very soon. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Thanks so much. Thanks for having me again.
My pleasure.
Hit that subscribe button, share the show with your tech-savvy friends and fellow entrepreneurs, and leave us a review on your favorite podcast app. Your support means the world to us.